Guys, have you heard that microplastics have been found in human ovaries? Okay, so this is coming out of a study published in February of this year out of Italy, where they analyzed the follicular fluid, the fluid that surrounds the developing, maturing eggs within each follicle, in women who are undergoing egg retrievals for the purpose of fertility treatment. So out of the 18 samples of follicular fluid that were analyzed, nearly 80% had microplastics detected in them. That's 14 out of the 18 samples. Now, granted, it's a small limited sample size, but that is a striking proportion. And findings like this raise such important questions about what might be happening inside of our bodies as we enter what people are calling this plasticine era. Now, microplastics specifically are tiny fragments of plastic that range from under 1 micron all the way up to 5 millimeters in size. And they come from the breakdown of larger plastic items that are in our environment. They're found everywhere, in our air, water, food, even in our blood. In this study, researchers used an electron microscope to identify the microplastics in follicular fluid from women that were undergoing IVF, and they used preheated glass equipment to try to minimize outside exposure to plastics. They ended up finding hundreds of microplastic particles in each sample, most commonly polyethylene, which is one of the compounds used in plastic bags and food packaging, along with PVCs, which can often be found in pipes and foam products. There's plenty of mounting data on all the ways that microplastics can inadvertently negatively impact our health, whether it be through inflammation, oxidative stress, causing immune dysfunction, and even endocrine disruption, where the way our hormones function can be affected. And what's worse, and something that a lot of people aren't aware of, is that it can act as a vehicle for toxic chemicals like dioxins, heavy metals, and BPAs, which can intensify the toxic effects of microplastics. There has been plenty of evidence to show the presence of microplastics in seminal fluid in humans. So we know that it can have an impact on the male reproductive system potentially, but this is the first study of its kind to show the presence of microplastics in human ovaries. This could potentially be really important for female fertility, as microplastic exposure in animal models has been associated with damaged ovarian tissue, reduced egg quality, and impaired embryo development. Even though this study involved a small number of samples, they did attempt to correlate the presence of microplastics with ovarian reserve markers, different hormone levels, as well as clinical outcomes. And they couldn't really find a strong correlation. But like I said, the sample size was limited, so further study is needed. Besides the fact that this is a tiny study and more samples are needed to be analyzed for more patients to really come to any sort of conclusions, there could also be external factors. They mentioned using preheated glassware in the lab when collecting the follicular fluid, but they don't mention anything about whether plastic tubing was used, and there is no control group. So it's important to not just focus on this population of women undergoing infertility treatment via IVF, but also to look at a broader group from the general population. Even still, I think that these results are pretty compelling. This idea that microplastics could be accumulating in the very space where our eggs are maturing and developing seems like a red flag to this fertility doctor. So what can we do? Well, you should avoid heating your food in plastic containers. Always use glass, stainless steel, or ceramic. It's really important to minimize single-use plastics. It's not good for the environment, and apparently it's not good for your health, and to opt for using reusable materials wherever possible. Filter your tap water and limit the consumption of bottled water from a plastic water bottle. Choose natural fibers. You can use microfiber catching laundry bags if you wash synthetic materials in your washing machine. And then when it comes to personal care and hygiene products, the ones with microbeads, like some exfoliants and toothpaste, should be avoided. I would say, as a rule of thumb, it's always a good idea to cut back on ultra-processed foods. Often these types of unhealthy foods are packaged heavily in plastic, and it's important to reduce our exposure wherever we can. I didn't make this post to instill panic and to make you feel like you need to live in a bubble. I just want to raise awareness. I think the more we understand how our environment can interact with our reproductive health, the better positioned we are to make safer choices and push for meaningful change. Fertility isn't just about our age and our hormones and biology. It's also about the environment and how our biology interacts with that. And that's one thing, refreshingly, that we can get a handle on and try to control.